To be fully aware of the present is an extraordinarily difficult task because the mind is incapable of facing a fact directly without deception. Thought is the product of the past, and therefore it can only think in terms of the past or of the future. It cannot be completely aware of a fact in the present. So long as thought, which is the product of the past, tries to eliminate contradiction and all the problems that it creates, it is merely pursuing a result, trying to achieve an end, and such thinking only creates more contradiction and hence conflict, misery, and confusion in us and therefore about us. To be free of contradiction, one must be aware of the present without choice. How can there be choice when you are confronted with a fact? Surely, the understanding of the fact is made impossible so long as thought is trying to operate upon the fact in terms of becoming, changing, altering. Therefore, self-knowledge is the beginning of understanding. No expert, no specialist can show us how to understand the process of the self. One has to study it, or oneself. You and I can help each other by talking about it, but none can unfold it for us. No specialist, no teacher can explore it for us. We can be aware of it only in our relationship to things, to property, to people, and to ideas. In relationship, we shall discover that contradiction arises when action is approximating itself to an idea. The idea is merely the crystallization of thought as a symbol, and the effort to live up to the symbol brings about a contradiction. Thus, so long as there is a pattern of thought, contradiction will continue. To put an end to the pattern, and so to contradiction, there must be self-knowledge. Then only is there a possibility of that tranquillity of mind in which alone the ultimate reality can come into being. The self. By that I mean the idea, the memory, the conclusion, the experience, the various forms of nameable and unnameable intentions, the conscious endeavour to be or not to be, the accumulated memory of the unconscious, the racial, the group, the individual, the clan, and the whole of it, all. Whether it is projected outwardly in action, or projected spiritually as virtue, the striving after all this is the self. In it is included the competition, the desire to be. The self is dividing, the self is self-enclosing. Its activities, however noble, are separative and isolating. There is the constant interplay between what is seen objectively and our reaction to it, and interplay between the conscious and the memories of the unconscious. According to my memories, I react to whatever I see, to whatever I feel. The naming of that reaction is experience. There is no experience unless there is a naming process going on at the same time. I want to understand what is truth. That is my desire, my longing. Then there follows my projection of what I consider to be the truth, because I have read lots about it. The very want, the very desire is projected, and I experience because I recognize that projected state. If I did not recognize that state, I would not call it truth. I recognize it, and I experience it, and that experience gives strength to the self, to the me. The more you are entrenched in your experience, the more does the self get strengthened. As a result of this, you have a certain strength of character, strength of knowledge, of belief, which you display to other people. Because the self is still acting, so your beliefs, your masters, your castes, your economic system are all a process of isolation, and they therefore bring contention. You must, if you are at all serious or earnest in this, dissolve this centre completely, and not justify it. That is why we must understand the process of experience. Identification is still the process of the self. The larger is simply the projection of the me, which I experience and which therefore strengthens the me. All the various forms of discipline, belief, and knowledge surely only strengthen the self. People are intelligent in different ways, but we are not integrally intelligent. To be integrally intelligent means to be without the self. The moment I say, I want to dissolve this, in that there is still the experiencing of the self, and so the self is strengthened. Creation is when the self is not there, because creation is not intellectual, is not of the mind, is not self-projected, is something beyond all experiencing. Any movement of the mind, positive or negative, is an experience which actually strengthens the me. When you believe that there is truth, God, the timeless state, immortality, is that not the process of strengthening the self? The self has projected that thing which you feel and believe will come and destroy the self. So, having projected this idea of continuance in a timeless state as a spiritual entity, you have an experience, and such experience only strengthens the self. You have not really destroyed the self, but only given it a different name, a different quality. The self is still there because you have experienced it. Thus, our action from the beginning to the end is the same action, only we think it is evolving, growing. If you observe inwardly, it is the same action going on, the same me functioning at different levels with different labels, different names. When you see the whole process, the cunning, extraordinary inventions, the intelligence of the self, how it covers itself up through identification, through virtue, through experience, through belief, through knowledge, when you see that the mind is moving in a circle, in a cage of its own making, not ideologically, verbally, not through projected experiencing, but when you are actually in that state, then you will see that the mind, being utterly still, has no power of creating. Whatever the mind creates is in a circle within the field of the self. When the mind is non-creating, there is creation, which is not a recognizable process. Reality, truth, is not to be recognized, or truth to come, belief, knowledge, experiencing, the pursuit of virtue, all this must go. That is why it is so important to be poor, not only in the things of the world, but also in belief and in knowledge. If you and I, as individuals, can see this whole working of the self, then we shall know what love is. When there is love, self is not. Fear can exist only in relation to something, not in isolation. I can be afraid only of what I know. When I say I am afraid of death, am I really afraid of the unknown, which is death, or am I afraid of losing what I have known? My fear is not of death, but of losing my association with things belonging to me. The fear of losing my family, my reputation, my character, my bank account, my appetites, and so on. I am afraid of the known, which means I am afraid of losing people, things, or ideas. I am afraid of discovering what I am, afraid of being at a loss, afraid of the pain which might come into being when I have lost or have not gained or have no more pleasure. There is fear of pain. Physical pain is a nervous response, but psychological pain arises when I hold on to things that give me satisfaction, for then I am afraid of anyone or anything that may take them away from me. The psychological accumulations prevent psychological pain, as long as they are undisturbed. That is, I am a bundle of accumulations, experiences, which prevent any serious form of disturbance, and I do not want to be disturbed. Therefore I am afraid of anyone who disturbs them. Thus my fear is of the known. Knowledge also helps to prevent pain. That is why I am afraid of losing my beliefs, though I have no perfect knowledge or concrete proof of the reality of such beliefs. Fear exists so long as there is accumulation of the known, which creates the fear of losing. Therefore, fear of the unknown is really fear of losing the accumulated known. Though my intention in accumulating is to ward off pain, pain is inherent in the process of accumulation. The very things which I have create fear, which is pain. The seed of defence brings offence. I want physical security. Thus I create a sovereign government, which necessitates armed forces, which means war, which destroys security. When I see the fallacy of demanding security, I do not accumulate any more. If you said that you see it, but you cannot help accumulating, it is because you do not really see that, inherently, in accumulation there is pain. Fear comes into being when I desire to be in a particular pattern. To live without fear means to live without a particular pattern. Any action on my part based on the desire to break the frame will only create another pattern, and therefore fear. I must not act. I must make no movement to break the frame. I see that the mind itself is the frame, the pattern. It lives in the habitual pattern which it has created for itself. Therefore, the mind itself is fear. Whatever the mind does goes towards strengthening an old pattern or furthering a new one. This means that whatever the mind does to get rid of fear causes fear. Identification is a process of self-forgetfulness. If I can identify myself with something greater, with something worthwhile, with beauty, with life, with truth, with belief, with knowledge, at least temporarily, there is an escape from the me. Fear is the non-acceptance of what is. There is understanding and freedom from the self only when I can look at it completely and integrally as a whole. And I can do that only when I understand the whole process of all activity born of desire, which is the very expression of thought. For thought is not different from desire, without justifying it, without condemning it, without suppressing it. If I can understand that, then I shall know if there is the possibility of going beyond the restrictions of the self. Life is becoming more and more complex. In order to escape from that, we try to renounce or be detached from things, from cars, from houses, from organisations, from cinemas, and from the innumerable circumstances outwardly thrust upon us. We think we shall be simple by withdrawing. Simplicity, which is fundamental, real, can only come into being inwardly, and from that there is an outward expression. That simplicity makes one more and more sensitive. A sensitive mind, a sensitive heart, is essential, for then it is capable of quick perception, quick reception. Inwardly, we are prisoners to our desires, to our wants, to our ideals, to innumerable motivations. Simplicity cannot be found unless one is free inwardly. Therefore, it must begin inwardly, not outwardly. There is an extraordinary freedom when one understands the whole process of belief, why the mind is attached to a belief. When there is freedom from beliefs, there is simplicity, but that simplicity requires intelligence, and to be intelligent, one must be aware of one's impediments. To be aware, one must be constantly on the watch, not established in any particular groove, in any particular pattern of thought or action. The outward expression is only an indication of our inward state, but to understand the inward state, one must approach through the outer. As we proceed to investigate the inward complexities of our being, we become more and more sensitive, free. It is this inward simplicity that is so essential because that simplicity creates sensitivity. A mind that is not sensitive, not alert, not aware, is incapable of any receptivity, any creative action. Conformity as a means of making ourselves simple really makes the mind and heart dull, insensitive. The more you understand the process of sublimation, suppression, substitution, the greater the possibility of being simple. Our minds are so crowded with an infinite knowledge of facts, of what others have said, that we have become incapable of being simple and having direct experience ourselves. These problems demand a new approach, and they can be approached only when we are simple, inwardly really simple. That simplicity comes only through self-knowledge, through understanding ourselves, the ways of our thinking and feeling, the movements of our thoughts, our responses, how we conform through fear to a public opinion, to what others say. Without being simple, one cannot be sensitive to all the things which are going on about us in the world. If one is not simple, one cannot be sensitive to the inward intimation of things. Most of us live so superficially on the upper level of our consciousness. There we try to be thoughtful or intelligent. There we try to make our minds simple through compulsion, through discipline. When we force the upper mind to be simple, such compulsion only hardens the mind, does not make the mind supple, clear, quick. To be simple in the whole, total process of our consciousness is extremely arduous, because there must be no inward reservation. There must be an eagerness to find out, to inquire into the process of our being, which means to be awake to every intimation, to every hint, to be aware of our fears, of our hopes, and to investigate, and to be free of them more and more and more. Only then, when the mind and the heart are really simple, not encrusted, are we able to solve the many problems that confront us. One must have the capacity to investigate all these things anew, because It is only through direct experience that our problems are solved. And to have direct experience there must be simplicity, which means there must be sensitivity. A mind is made dull by the weight of knowledge, by the past, by the future. Only a mind that is capable of adjusting itself to the present continually, from moment to moment, can meet the powerful influences and pressures constantly put upon us by our environment. Such a mind is capable of extraordinary receptivity, because there is no barrier, there is no fear, there is no going towards something. Therefore it is capable of receiving grace, God, truth, or what you will. But a mind that is pursuing reality is not a simple mind. A mind that is seeking out, searching, groping, agitated, is not a simple mind. Happiness is not an end, it is the result of reality. When the mind and the heart have become simple and therefore sensitive, not through any form of compulsion, direction, or imposition, however complex our problems, we shall be able to approach them freshly and see them differently. It is only when one has humility, not a cultivated humility, that one is able to meet the things of life that are so pressing, because then one is not important. One doesn't look through one's own pressures and sense of importance. One looks at the problem for itself, and then one is able to solve it. To know ourselves means to know our relationship with the world, not only with the world of ideas and people, but also with nature, with the things we possess. Watch yourself without identification, without any comparison, without any condemnation. Just watch, and you will see an extraordinary thing taking place. You not only put an end to an activity which is unconscious, because most of our activities are unconscious. Further, you are aware of the motives of that action, without inquiry, without digging into it. When you are aware, you see the whole process of your thinking and action, but it can happen only when there is no condemnation. When I condemn something, I do not understand it. Just be aware, without any sense of justification, which may appear rather negative, but it is not negative. It has the quality of passivity, which is direct action, and you will discover this if you experiment with it. You cannot keep on thinking about it, speculating about it, or questioning it. You have to be sensitive enough to receive the content of it. In that process, we begin to understand ourselves, not only the superficial layers of our consciousness, but the deeper, which is much more important, because there are all our motives or intentions, our hidden, confused demands, anxieties, fears, appetites. Outwardly, we may have them all under control, but inwardly they are boiling. Until those have been completely understood through awareness, obviously there cannot be freedom, there cannot be happiness, there is no intelligence. That intelligence cannot be derived from or cultivated through specialization. It comes into being only when we are passively aware of the whole process of our consciousness, which is to be aware of ourselves without choice, without choosing what is right or what is wrong. When you are passively aware, you will see that out of that passivity, which is not idleness, which is not sleep, but extreme alertness, the problem has quite a different significance, which means there is no longer identification with the problem, and therefore there is no judgment, and hence the problem begins to reveal its content. If you are able to do that constantly, continuously, then every problem can be solved fundamentally, not superficially. The problem is always a problem of relationship, with things, with people, or with ideas. There is no other problem. And to meet the problem of relationship, with its constantly varying demands, to meet it rightly, to meet it adequately, one has to be aware passively. This passivity is not a question of determination, of will, of discipline. To be aware that we are not passive is the very beginning. Then, as we begin to know ourselves in relationship to the problem, how we respond, what are the various prejudices, demands, pursuits in meeting that problem, this awareness will reveal the process of our own thinking, of our own inward nature, and in that there is a release. The chooser is in confusion, therefore he chooses. The man who is clear and simple does not choose. What is, is. Action based on an idea is obviously the act of choice, and such action is not liberating. On the contrary, it only creates further resistance, further conflict, according to that conditioned thinking. The important thing, therefore, is to be aware from moment to moment, without accumulating the experience which awareness brings, because the moment you accumulate, you are aware only according to that accumulation, according to that pattern, according to that experience, and therefore there is no longer observation, but merely translation. When there is translation, there is choice, and choice creates conflict. In conflict there can be no understanding. This passive awareness does not come through any form of discipline, through any practice. It is to be just aware from moment to moment of our thinking and feeling, not only when we are awake, for we shall see, as we go into it more deeply, that we begin to dream, that we begin to throw up all kinds of symbols, which we translate as dreams. Thus we open the door into the hidden, which becomes the known. But to find the unknown, we must go beyond the door.